Hello, everyone. Welcome to this little retrospective Bowie video. This is something a little different than what I normally do because today we're in our Discord and we got some people in here. Currently, we have Frostbite. You can say hi.
Oh, hey guys.
We have Z-Twig.
Hey.
We have, I do not know how to pronounce this. We have Morrissey. Morrissey is here.
Hey, hello. You can just call me Ralph. It's Ralph Curtis actually.
Ralph? Okay, good.
Yeah, Ralph.
And then we have Whisper who's here. His mic is muted. He might just be in the chat. We don't know. But we're going to do this little kind of journey back through Bowie, the 12 albums I listened to. I'll be doing the ranking the albums I listened to, and I'll put my 15 favorite songs, and then we'll just kind of go through each album and we'll talk about, what each different one and get some extra feedback from the guys here. So, Z-Twig.
Yeah.
Guess my 8th favorite song.
Why 8th? Oh.
Just do it.
I only saw the Berlin series, so one that you liked was Warsaw, so I guess that.
False. Okay, Frostbite. Guess song number 11.
We don't get any hints. It's just straight up guess.
Yeah.
Let's just throw it out there and say I can't give everything away.
No. Okay, Ralph. You gotta guess song number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Neukölln.
Unbelievable, you got it wrong. I just wanted to see if anybody could get it. All right, hey, Whisper, you say you're here. I want you to try to guess song number 10. Whisper is typing. Oh, man. The suspense is killing me.
Wow.
No idea. Also false. All right, so I'll just list off my favorite albums, and then I'll go through my favorite songs, and then we'll just kind of go chronologically and talk about each album, whether or not you guys have heard it. But from least favorite to most favorite for the albums, at number 12, I have Man Who Sold the World. It's probably not a controversial opinion, I don't think. 11 is Hunky Dory. 10 is Ziggy Stardust. 9 is Aladdin Sane. 8 is Black Star. 7 is Outside, which that might be kind of like, blasphemous to put Outside above Black Star, but they're kind of they're kind of close to me. Those two are really close. 6 is Lodger. 5 is Scary Monsters. 4 The Next Day. 3 is Station to Station. 2 is Heroes, and 1 is Low. So I feel like that's like probably kind of a standard list. I don't know, like, do you guys disagree with any of that? Here, this should be all of them in order. Low, Heroes, and Station to Station are the top 3. What do you guys think of that list? Any good? What would you change?
To be honest, the top 3 is my favorite too. Low, Heroes, and Station to Station in this order. They are
Nice.
great. When I was younger, I was really into 70-74 era, but not so now. So I think that list I would sign under that definitely.
I'm surprised that The Next Day is up so high. I mean,
Yeah, me too, honestly.
I mean, it's a really good album, but like
I
even,
would
even in your video when you're talking about it, like it's not very cohesive. It's kind of like the individual songs are really good, but they don't seem like they flow very well together.
Yeah, it was that was more of like I really don't know how to describe it because I'm not even saying that this is like what I think is best. It's just these were my favorites, and for some reason I just song to song, as individual tracks, I think there was more I liked off of The Next Day compared to everything below it in terms of just my enjoyability. But yeah, it does feel weird to put it at like 4. That did feel a little bizarre.
The Next Day is more solid. Like, there's no really bad tracks on it.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way too. Those are my albums. My songs, my top 15 songs. I kind of threw this together somewhat quickly. but I think I still stand by a lot of this. 15, I have V2 Schneider. 14, I have Aladdin Sane. 13, Word on a Wing. And I'll post all this in the chat when I'm done. 13 is Word on a Wing. 12 is Andy Warhol. 11, Speed of Life. 10, Station to Station. 9 is Scream Like a Baby. 8, Look Back in Anger. 7, Subterraneans. 6, Sound and Vision. 5, Ashes to Ashes. 4, Always Crashing in the Same Car. 3, Dancing Out in Space. 2, Heroes. And 1, A New Career in a New Town. So there's the list. Also, Whisper said Heroes is kind of too high. I don't know. Black Star seems more well-liked as a whole, I think. Yeah, I could see that being a stipulation. But what do you guys think of that list of favorites? I feel like it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, your number one pick is a bit odd.
Yeah, I don't know why that song has just really struck a chord with me, and I've listened to it a bunch.
I mean, I kind of get it. I love all instrumentals from Low and Heroes, to be honest, and I would put, for example, Subterraneans even higher because I absolutely love that song. So
Sure.
For me, it's kind of Always Crashing in the Same Car. Also, it's really great. I mean, I kinda get it why it's listed that way. Yeah, Andy Warhol is really cool too.
Sound of Vision is my favorite always.
Always, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah,
it was a grower for me.
Yeah, I think looking at your list for the songs, it makes sense for the songs I'd probably expect you, because like, especially when you were listening through them, like those instrumental, those ambient kind of spacey kind of tracks. I'm really glad to see Sound and Vision and Ashes to Ashes because I really love both of those songs.
Sure. Yeah, I'm again, another surprise with The Next Day was like Dancing Out in Space becoming a favorite track. It just, again, another song that just kind of came out of nowhere and just really hit me. Which is what I really love about some of these reactions is like, even if it's an album or an artist that I'm not fully in love with, there's always a good chance I'll come across a small handful of tracks that I just like really like or really resonate with me. So yeah. So those are the songs. So now we'll just kind of go through chronologically here and kind of get your guys' opinions. So The Man Who Sold the World, what do you guys think of it?
I like it more than like some of the other stuff around that period.
I haven't heard anything except for Space Oddity off of his first two albums. So would you say like The Man Who Sold the World is superior to those first two?
No, actually, like Space Oddity better, but I feel like it's more cohesive as an album.
I think The Man Who Sold the World is like first really. For me, it's like the first album that I really like from Bowie, because I don't really like the self-titled, and Space Oddity for me is like only the song Space Oddity, and the rest it's not interesting for me.
Yeah, the self-titled's odd.
The self-titled is just weird. It's really you have to pay a like high price for the original LP, and it's just not really worth it because it's just folk thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could view, The Man Who Sold the World is still with him trying to, I think, figure out what position and like which path he's going down, but it's definitely a lot more cohesive than previous ones. I would say Hunky Dory is really where he is the first step of him actually stepping into having a really solid album.
Yeah, and when I was going through, I forget what live stream it was, but when I was asking everybody, and I don't even remember who all was in there, I was like, which Bowie album should I do? Let's pick like 10 or so. They all made the similar case where it's like he really starts to kind of show up and like make a name for himself and like kind of have a unique voice around The Man Who Sold the World, and that was their reason for kind of skipping the first two tracks, or first two albums, sorry. We'll go to the next one here. How about, for the sake of like sanity, let's go down the list like in order. So like we'll go to like Frostbite, and then also Shiftless When Idle is here. And then like, you know, Whisper if he wants to say anything, then Twig, and then Ralph. We just kind of go like down the list. Yeah, so Man Who Sold the World, I don't know. It didn't like, you know, like I said in the video, I'm not a big hard rock or blues rock guy, but it didn't feel like it was different. It didn't feel like it was Bowie yet. Like Hunky Dory, I would say, is the first real Bowie album, but I could see the case being made for The Man Who Sold the World kind of being like the beginnings of that, I suppose. And the only thing before that being just the song Space Oddity. So
yeah, I feel like actually the album Space Oddity is more of a Bowie album than The Man Who Sold the World.
Sure, I could see that. Whisper says The Man Who Sold the World seems like a Pablo Honey-esque type of album, if that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. Because like with Pablo Honey, it just feels like it's ripping off, you know, Sonic Youth, Pixies, other grunge things in that era, and it's just kind of like, it's not, there's hints of what Radiohead will go on to do with the Bends, but it's just not fully there yet. And I think that is very similar with what's happening with The Man Who Sold the World.
An artist developing pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of finding their voice, but they don't fully have it yet. So, okay, so Hunky Dory, Frostbite. What do you think of Hunky Dory?
I think Hunky Dory is, like you said, it's really his first step of pretty much becoming the artist he is. And I mean, there's a lot of great songs on that album, and just on a whole, I think it's much more enjoyable to listen to than the previous one. Just listen to the whole thing, and I mean, it even has a couple of my favorite tracks on it, like "Oh You Pretty Things" and "Life on Mars." Both of those I really love, and then "Queen Bitch" is also really great.
I always forget that "Life on Mars" is on this album, because that is definitely like a precursor to Ziggy and Aladdin Sane as far as getting into that kind of glam stuff. You know, it almost doesn't feel at home on Hunky Dory just based on the other tracks around it. It feels like it should be something that comes later.
Well, Hunky Dory is kind of very low key, and that's probably the most grandiose song off the album. So
sure,
I can kind of see that.
Sure. What about you, Twig? What do you think?
Life on Mars is my favorite Bowie song, or like second, I'm not sure, but as like the whole album, I'm actually not that big of a fan of it.
That makes sense. Yeah, it just feels kind of like a smattering of tracks. It doesn't feel like an album, you know? I can get behind that. What about you, Ralph?
For me, Hunky Dory is like the first really Bowie album, like you all said. The Man Who Sold the World is album I can listen, and okay, it's not bad. But the Hunky Dory is the first one that I really think, whoa, it's Bowie. I can like listen to it and be like overwhelmed by his ideas and all. For me, it's the first one from this Bowie stuff. So. I don't like every song on Hunky Dory, but on Hunky Dory there are like classics, like, you know, Life on Mars and stuff, and it's basically pretty proto Ziggy Stardust stuff. So you can really sense Ziggy Stardust coming, and it's also really I don't know, but I can sense a little Space Oddity in it. Like, it's more lighter, definitely lighter than The Man Who Sold the World. It's really good for me because I'm not like hard rock blues guy also. So
right, yeah, and it's I think it kind of is a good tell for the album, starting with Changes, because that's such like a light, chipper tune that's almost like borderline silly in terms of its like atmosphere, and it's wildly different from the album before. And that kind of like sets it off as kind of, it's probably the lightest song on the album, I think, but it kind of shows that he's shifting gears with this album. But I agree, it's not an album that I think I love every song off of, and there's some that I'm still kind of like grappling with and struggling to know how I feel about, but like Changes, Oh You Pretty Things, I've really warmed up to Life on Mars. I don't know if I love it, but I definitely like it a lot more than I first did on my first listen. and still love Andy Warhol. It's still a great track too. So if Whisper wants to say anything, you can. But we'll move on. Ziggy Stardust. Frostbite, what do you think?
Personally, Ziggy Stardust is probably one of my favorite Bowie albums. It's either my favorite or second favorite. It's not. I guess looking back at it now, it doesn't seem as like groundbreaking. But I guess if you put yourself back in the time period when it was released, like that was something that really wasn't around at the time. And I personally just love the album. I know you're not too fan of the hard rock or the blues rock or the glam stuff, but I like a lot of that kind of music. So this album, pretty much every track on Ziggy Stardust I really love. There's like 2 or 3 songs that are just okay, but even there, I think they're still pretty good tracks.
Sure. What about you, Shiftless?
Well, like, it was my first Bowie album, so I think it was a kind of really interesting introduction towards him. But, like, at first, I didn't see much interest of it, because I thought it was a bit too fey for a hard rock album, because that's kind of what it was sold to me as. But as the years gone past, I kind of more appreciated the subtlety in a lot of Bowie's kind of compositions, because he had more of an ear to it than I think most people at the time really gave him. Even though he was kind of presenting himself more as a bigger rock star than he was more of a pop songwriter.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. What about you, Twig?
I think it's like some of his most famous tracks in it. It works really well as an album. The only like couple tracks I don't like on it. But all the rest, it's like back-to-back good tracks.
What about you, Ralph?
For me, Ziggy Stardust was, to be honest, it was the second Bowie album I ever bought, and I remember just putting it in on a turntable and just hearing it was definitely something big, and I can see why it was definitely something back in the days. In '72, there was nothing like it, I think, and to be honest, the album is like 90% of the songs are great, and there's only like one that I think it's, or maybe 2 that's like okay, but rest is great. But to be honest, I'm not into this Ziggy Stardust era now. It's too flashy for me, but I used to enjoy it a lot back in old days.
Yeah, I can vibe with you on that one. Whisper says third favorite album by him, classic in my opinion. I like I said in the video, I had tried it probably, I don't even know how long ago it was, 5-7 years ago, and I had zero clue about Bowie. I may have not even heard Heroes at the time, and it just did not sit well with me, and I couldn't get into it. But I was really pleasantly surprised upon filming the reaction and listening to these songs, because I'm not a big glam fan, but I think that the songwriting is really strong on a lot of these, and the production is good. It has a good concept album feel to it, and I think it was either Twig or Rolf who said like there's only really 1 or 2 kind of weaker tracks, but everything else, it doesn't really run together is the thing. Every track kind of stands on its own, I think. And I also feel similar where it's like I prefer, Berlin era stuff, later stuff, but I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this, and I definitely need to give it a few more listens, I think. But yeah, and then a year later, he comes out with Aladdin Sane, which is in some ways a little bit more of the same, but I would argue it's rockier than Ziggy. And it's definitely more experimental, but it still has a really good pop appeal to it. What do you think, Frostbite?
Yeah, I'd say the same. It's kind of like Ziggy Goes to America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it continues what he was doing, and like you said, goes further. And like it's a really great, solid album, and like especially like the keys on it is, and then. I'm just looking at the track listing for it real fast, and it's got quite a few classics on it. Driving Saturday might be my favorite on the album. but I even enjoy the Rolling Stones cover he does on it. And because I
me too.
always enjoy when big artists can take another popular song by another and then change it up and make it their own. And I think that's kind of what he does. And going back to what you said about you're not a big glam guy but on Ziggy Stardust, you were pleasantly surprised, because it just feels like a solid songwriting and everything. And I mean, I think that's what Bowie's really good at. Like even his stuff that like I don't go back and revisit a lot, or I'm not like the hugest fan of. Like I wouldn't say it's bad. It's still good. I don't know, just the way he does concept albums as a whole. You can go through and listen to them, and even if you don't revisit individual tracks, you respect, I guess, the artistry and the songwriting on it.
Sure, and I had said this, I think it was the Black Star reaction, how, or maybe it was Next Day, something along the lines of his music is never fully straightforward. Like there's always a bit of like friction, and it's a little off, it's a little odd, and it's like I'm professed lover of dream pop, and I love a lot of dream pop tracks, and a big part of that reason is just because they go down so easy and they're so pleasant and satisfying to listen to for me. But one of the things I've kind of grappled with Bowie, and one of the things I've come to really appreciate about him, is just how like he doesn't really have any songs save for maybe Heroes that are just super straightforward, easy to listen to, that you don't have to kind of like grapple with something odd and unique that you've never heard before. And for a while that was like a detractor for me, and now that's become one of like I think his biggest strengths for me, even if like I'm still struggling, if that makes sense. It makes it really engaging to listen to in that way. What about you, Shiftless? What do you think?
I mean, it's probably my favorite Bowie album, just on the fact that, like you said, it is probably more rockier, but I really appreciate the kind of weird and jazz avant-garde like flourishes around a lot of the tracks, because it really brings up kind of this cinematic sensibility that I think Bowie was really going for. And like it has so many like great songs like Aladdin, Sane, and Time, where you can feel his sense of drama being played with, and theatricality that he got from like the stage. I mean, I feel sad that a lot of the later era, like the Berlin era, was a bit more subdued, especially on the stage side of it. Mm-hmm. But it's very much him trying to change up as an artist, so I respect that more than him being something of a caricature.
Sure, and I think that this album is his best manifestation of like the glam persona. I think that Ziggy was kind of like, toying with that, but I feel like this is definitely way more sensational than Ziggy, even if it doesn't quite have that like dramatic story to it. Like Ziggy definitely has kind of a narrative going on, but this just feels way more sensational than Ziggy in some ways. I think part of that's like toying with the genres. The crazy piano from Mike Garson contributes to that as well. But yeah, Whisper says didn't listen much to Aladdin. It was okay, I guess, but man, how dare you? Just kidding. What about you, Ralph?
It was the first Bowie album I ever listened to. Now I think it's like Ziggy Stardust, but rockier and in parts enough experimental to be still open to bigger public. I like that quite a lot, and it's I prefer the rocker sound of Aladdin than more classic of Ziggy Stardust. Yeah, I still remember when I put the vinyl first time on the turntable, and just this opening song just blasted, and I was like, yeah, it was definitely something.
Man, I'd love to listen to the title track on vinyl. That'd be incredible. Yeah, solid album. So we're going to save discussion. Twig just kind of vanished, but maybe it'll show up again. We'll save discussion for some of the big ones that I wasn't able to do at the end, and that'll just be kind of like a nice button for the end of the video. So if there are albums that you guys have heard, you can talk about it, and that can be a nice like lead in for the future reactions I'll probably do. So we're skipping Pinups, Diamond Dogs, Young Americans, and then the next one I listened to was Station to Station in '76. What a wild album. This I'm still trying to like put my finger on how I feel, because it's only 6 tracks. They're all fairly long, and each one feels wildly different one from the next. So it's kind of like just going through 6 fairly big songs that do not feel like the one that came before. Except for maybe like, I don't know, Word on a Wing and Wild is the Wind are probably the 2 closest that are similar here. But what do you think, Frostbite?
I would say Station to Station is one that most Bowie fans put pretty much near the top or right up there. It's probably not one I'd go back to a lot. I mean, I guess specifically, especially since the title track is just so long. Right. But revisiting as you were listening to it, I mean, it's just a really great album. And I mean, Golden Years is probably the one I listen to the most off here. It's probably the one with the most pop appeal, I guess. But Wild is the Wind, even that's another one of him doing a cover, and I mean that's my favorite version I've heard of that song. And him taking that song, it feels like there's so much emotion in it, like especially watching him do it live when he would do it live, and his live performances of that's probably some of my favorite videos of his.
Sure. We have someone new, Rickenbacker. Are you there?
Oh, he left. Wow.
Shiftless, what about you?
It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but it's one that I have a lot of interest in, just because I know we're going to save like his other album for later, but after something like Young Americans, where it's very soul inspired, it's funny to see him take that aspect and then completely subvert it entirely and still make
sure.
His own.
And it was 1 year away from Young Americans, right? 75 to 76. That's a pretty big change in a short amount of time.
It's very much a calculated change, but then again, that's always been Bowie, to be very aware of what he's doing at the time.
Right.
I mean, I appreciate a lot of funk music and soul music, so to me, even though it's very much a clipped version and a very sort of detachment of it, I still appreciate it a lot from a musical standpoint. Lyrically, it's kind of weird for me, but I really appreciate how this slowly drives him more towards what the Berlin trilogy was going to be.
Sure. Rickenbacker, are you there? Do you want to talk? Or are you just going to be in chat?
Oh, no, I just want to hear the Bowie opinions.
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to type in the artist chat channel, you can. I think Whisper's doing the same thing. But what about you, Rolf? What do you think of Station to Station?
Oh wow, Station to Station. I really was interested in this Finway Duke persona, and I think
and it only lasted for this album, right? And then
it was gone. And to be honest, like Ziggy Stardust had like an ending, there was like an ending for Ziggy Stardust concert and like something like that. But Finway Duke just faded away. In Low, he was just gone, and Bowie never spoke anything about it. And when you look at what Bowie was doing at the time, he was basically living on cocaine only.
Yeah.
And he was actually, had some real problems with drugs, and he was really into right-wing imagery. So he was walking around in this almost like a uniform suits, and it was really big change from Stardust, from this flashy guy to this really it's even hard
straight edge kind of thing.
Yeah, and when Station to Station is like my top 3 album, but I think when I listen to this album, there's something sinister about it. I can't put a finger on it, but there's something odd, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, I mean, this album probably encapsulates the darkest period of Bowie's life. Like you said, he was way off the deep end with his cocaine addiction, and I mean, he was always paranoid that he was going to become schizophrenic. Like, what was his father that was schizophrenic, or his grandfather, or something like that?
From what I've heard, he was driving around the town for 30 minutes because he thought he was being followed and stuff like that.
So he was pretty much, losing his mind at this time period as well. So I mean, that's why when you go into the Berlin trilogy next, that was when he was, trying to sober up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then he goes to Berlin and continues to drive his car like a maniac, and then makes a song about it.
Yeah. I always would like to, when I listen to Station, I like to listen to the Iggy Pop's The Idiot, because it's...
It was made at the same time, right?
Yeah, and it was basically Bowie and Iggy trying to get rid of drugs. So it's definitely something. The Idiot have the same feeling, I think. This sinister something in the background. But going back to Bowie, yeah, I love that album. Top 3, great.
Yeah, what you just mentioned, that's become a big reason why I want to react to The Idiot and Lust for Life, because I've heard the Lust for Life track, and I've heard The Passenger in passing, but I've never really kind of dived into Iggy Pop or understood him to any big degree. But I think it'd be kind of cool to do a video on those two albums, because now that I've gone through the Bowie Berlin stuff, to kind of see the other side, or
Yeah, and there's also, to be honest, The Idiot is kind of mythical, because Ian Curtis and stuff like that, so it's definitely something to listen to.
Sure. Rickenbacker says, I guess the whole Ziggy thing started from Queen Bitch from Hunky Dory. I don't know anything about that.
I think it's just started from the whole Hunky Dory album.
Yeah.
Just one specific song. Or if I would choose,
overall vibe.
If I had to choose a song from Hunky Dory, I would rather say Life on Mars.
Yeah, maybe I could see that. Station to Station is Bowie at his best persona, I think. Everything from fascist mythos to mysticism, with all the Kabbalah stuff on the album. Yeah, it's just a weird smattering that doesn't seem like it should work well together, and I still don't know if it does, but it's such a unique set of songs and such a unique statement that I keep kind of grappling with it, and I don't know. I don't know. It hasn't really settled yet, but I'm having fun kind of figuring it out, I suppose, is the best way I can put it. Okay, so that's Station to Station. And of course, that leads off next year. We get Low. No pun intended. The people say the first. How do you guys feel about this? The Berlin trilogy being described as Low, Heroes, Lodger, because I feel like Station, Low, Heroes is a better descriptor. What do you guys think? What's the reason for putting Lodger in the Berlin trilogy? Because it seems like a separate entity to me.
To be honest, I know it's out of the order, but
It's all good.
I think the only reason why Lodger is in Berlin trilogy is because Eno is the producer. To be honest, it has nothing to do with Heroes artistically, or even it just sounds definitely different. It's definitely more happy.
Okay, so it's kind of like so you could call it the Eno trilogy then.
Yeah, I would say that, and then also maybe just because he was trying to separate himself from the Station to Station period, because, being that he was getting sober and getting clean, and that was such a dark period, he probably didn't want to associate that period with this new period that he was going into.
Sure. It just it feels a little awkward to me to include in that trilogy, with the only through line being Eno, to include an album that comes out 2 years later that has little to no krautrock aspects to it. It's not recorded in Europe, I don't think. I think it was New York, right? It definitely
wasn't Germany.
Yeah, it seems bizarre. I can kind of see it, but I I just feel like Station Low and Heroes as a trilogy makes more of a statement where it's like, here's the beginning where he starts in this rut, and here's him getting out of it, and kind of it culminating with Heroes, and the title track Heroes being one of his biggest songs. It's kind of that seems like a more poignant set of 3 albums to me.
I mean, I guess maybe the idea was started with the trilogy, and then by the time they got to Lodger, it ended up being something different. Maybe.
I don't know, but
I think Lodger feels more of a companion piece to something like Scary Monsters, because just like the overall production style and kind of the direction Bowie was going in.
Yeah, Lodger feels
pop appeal.
Lodger feels closer to Scary Monsters in many ways to me than it feels closer to Heroes, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Rickenbacker says, brilliant album. The Berlin trilogy was more getting clean from the whole drug lifestyle. So Frostbite, what do you think of Low?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very solid and really good. It's this period, even though these are like some of Bowie's most acclaimed albums, are not ones that a lot of the tracks that I revisit very often, especially even like rehearing a bunch of the Eno tracks, as you were re-listening to them. And I mean, they're really good, but those ambient instrumental tracks aren't generally something I play back a lot,
Sure.
They're not like, I guess, engaging in the way that, because if I'm listening to songs, I like to sing along, or or whatever, their energy, and they're really good, but they're more like something that I would have on as I'm doing other things rather than actively engaging in them. But I mean, there are some really good songs like Sound and Vision, like I said earlier, is one of my favorite Bowie tracks of his entire discography. And then Always Crashing in the Same Car is also really good. So they're really good, but it's not something that I revisit a whole lot.
Sure. What about you, Shiftless?
As far as Low is concerned, like, I appreciate it more than I would probably listen to it. Like, it's just not the type of music I tend to go for, and I think that's mostly because of Eno's really sort of atmospheric identity. Though I did appreciate a lot of what he did for Roxy Music.
That's a what is it, For Your Pleasure or something like that? What's the name of that album?
It's For Your Pleasure, and their first self-titled album.
Yeah, that is one I still need to get to. I think I have that on my list. What about you, Rolf?
Low, definitely my favorite album. I love instrumentals. To be honest, I always liked Eno ambience, Cluster and Eno, or Eno Mobis Rodelius. Definitely something cool. I like Warszawa a lot, and Subterranes. It's definitely something to walk around Warszawa and listening to Warszawa, to Warsaw. So yeah, and I kind of get why Warsaw sounds like this, because I live near Warsaw, so definitely I could see some old pictures, and it was not definitely pleasant place. I like how Low is this new wave, let's say, sound to it. It's definitely more. I used to like it less because I was into glam and all. But as I get older, I definitely changed my mind, and for me, Berlin trilogy and definitely Low is something, because I like the sadness behind those tracks, because you can feel it. I think there is some kind of sadness behind it, and I like it quite a lot.
Sure. Rickenbacker says Speed of Life is probably my favorite Bowie instrumental. Whisper says Low is really good, but some of the tracks shrunk it down a little bit. My expectations, it was hard to not have them like sky high when I went into this, because, it's like 10 out of 10s everywhere. Pitchfork claimed it was the best album of the 70s, so I'm like, what is this going to be? And going into it, there's some tracks that I haven't come back to very much, like Breaking Glass, What in the World. Be My Wife is also kind of here and there. And then like Art Decade and Weeping Wall I don't come back to a lot either. But there's something about Speed of Life, Sound and Vision, Always Crashing in the Same Car, A New Career in a New Town, where they hit me in the same way that some like dream pop and ambient tracks do. They almost feel like meditative in a way. It's really hard to describe, and you definitely get that with the second side with the ambient tracks that are just much more straightforward. But there's something about the tracks I enjoy off the first side that they're not really poppy tracks. They're not even necessarily rocky tracks. They don't go hard or anything like that, but they just make such a unique statement, and they have a very unique texture to them. And I can't quite put my finger on why, but they appeal to me in the same way like an artist like Yola Tango or Beach House might appeal to me, where there's just this certain vibrance, I guess, to them, and it really attracts me to it. But I fully understand anyone who says like I don't come back to this album that much, because in a way I don't either. It's like the same reason I don't come back to certain heavier post-rock albums, because it's just like I might like the music, but I just might not be in that headspace to take in that kind of music at that moment.
Yeah, I think well, like the whole Berlin period as a whole is except for certain tracks, isn't something I revisit a whole lot. But I think one thing to keep in mind is just the impact that they made on music and innovation. Because he was experimenting with things that weren't in popular music at the time, I guess. And so
certainly,
I guess now, hearing them now and playing them back now, and judging it just based on, how much that I enjoy the tracks or something, I might not enjoy them as much as I enjoy some of his, more straight ahead albums that, like Ziggy's Stardust or something like that. But I think one of the reasons for the high ratings on something like this is because it was so different and new, and they made a giant impact. So it's it's not just whether the tracks are necessarily stand out great. I think the albums as a whole just made such a huge difference in music.
Definitely.
I wanted to say something, but I forgot.
If you remember, we can come back to it.
Jesus.
It's all good. I agree. Ziggy Stardust caught the world off guard, musically speaking. Yep.
I wanted just to add, I think Low opened West, England and USA to krautrock a little with Bowie with Eno. I think he opened those areas to krautrock a little more.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to consider, like, it's commented on, and I also said this, I think, how this definitely seems like a really early precursor to what would become and what would inform post-rock later. And in a way, this album is kind of rock meets ambient.
Yeah.
And in a way, or ambient / drone, and in a way, that's what post-rock is.
Mm-hmm.
And so this necessarily doesn't feel like post-rock at times, but I think that's just kind of like those were the two worlds meeting. It's like peanut butter and chocolate or whatever it is. Who would have thought? But it's like when you put them together, it's like, oh, we have something great and new here, and I think it just really informed that scene going forward. But then you have Heroes. Same year, recorded, September to November of 1976 is when Low was recorded, and then July, August 1977 was Heroes, so it's like pretty much almost immediately after. What do you guys think about Heroes in comparison to Low here?
I probably think Low, looking at the track list of both of them, I think I probably prefer Low a little bit more than Heroes on a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Heroes as a whole isn't one I revisit very often. Beauty and the Beast is a really great standout track off of it. And then, Heroes being probably Bowie's most popular song, and usually I take the stance that artists' most popular music's not really generally their best. But I think Heroes might be maybe his great. It's not necessarily my favorite that I listen to the most, but musically speaking, I just think it might be his best track. For the emotion.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. What about you, Shiftless?
I really appreciate it. I actually do like a lot more of Heroes just because it feels fuller and the ideas feel more realized. And I really appreciate Robert Fripp being in the guitar to kind of help really like elevate the guitar pieces into something that's either more ragged or much more melodically like, diverse. So it kind of really propels a lot of the album forward. That and Heroes is most likely like one of his most endearing songs ever, which is strange for a song that doesn't sound anything like the majority of the 70s.
Definitely. What about you, Ralph?
To be honest, I completely agree what Whisper wrote. Heroes is a more mainstream version of Low. I think it's true, really. And I don't like how tracks are listed there. I mean, you've got the side A, and it's fine. It's album opens with a really cool song. Then you have side B, okay, ambient, cool, and the last ambient leaves you with this kind of haunting feeling, and then on the last song, The Secret Life of Arabia. It's like what? It should be like on the end of A side or something like that.
I'm glad I don't feel alone in that. That was so bizarre to me.
It was. I remember listening to this album on vinyl first time. It was 4 a.m. I have insomnia, so I was just sitting and listening to this ambient. I was like in another dimension, and then Secret Life of Arabia.
This dancey Arabian track, yeah.
Yeah, it was bizarre, but I like this album quite a lot.
I struggle with it because I remember enjoying it at the time, but for some reason, there's just very little on this I've come back to. It might just be because I'm busy or what have you, but like Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion, Sons of the Silent Age, Blackout, like I just haven't gone back and listened to those very much. I probably should. And I don't think I really disliked any of them, but like V2 Schneider I really like, just has a really simple track. And then you have, Sense of Doubt, Moss Garden, Neo Colm as the little trio there, which was pretty good. Not quite as good as, the second side of Low, I think, but it's still pretty solid. I really like Moss Garden's kind of oriental flair to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think Secret Life of Arabia is a fine little poppy dance track, even though it's in a really bizarre spot on the track listing. But yeah, it feels just slightly inferior to Low to me. And part of that just might be the track listing. I'm not sure. It feels a little colder than Low, I guess. I don't know, Low has this certain warmth to it, I suppose, whereas Heroes seems a little more colder and distant, I suppose is the way to describe it. I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not.
Feeling about Low and Heroes are quite bizarre because I can feel sadness behind Low, but the sound is warmer than Heroes, which is, I think it's warmer album than Low.
Yeah, definitely.
And like you said, I haven't listened to almost like whole A side of Heroes beside Blackout. I definitely listen to Heroes too much, so much that when I hear it again, I'm just sick. Yeah, I've listened to Heroes definitely too much.
Yeah, I feel like the A side of Low is better than the A side of Heroes, almost certainly.
I would say A side of Low is better than A side of Heroes, but also B side of Low is better than B side of Heroes.
True, yeah.